Sandra and I travel online to the other side of the world to Christchurch. Today, our guest is Carol Caldwell, the Director of Enlightened Fire Solutions in New Zealand. It's a real pleasure to have you here, Carol.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And nice to get the time zone so that we can join up.
Yeah. We have a series of questions for you today because we'd like to get to know you better. You have a delightful career as a fire engineer for over 35 years now, and the story of Enlightened Solutions has started back in 2002. You've been with this company pretty much all your life, and we can definitely say that fire engineering is your baby. And back in 1995, the company was called Caldwell Consulting Limited. I'd like us to follow this path from the beginning to the end and ask you how you got into fire engineering. How was fire engineering looking back then?
Well, I got into fire engineering quite a distance away from where I am now. So since I grew up in the US, my accent is US, even though I'm based in New Zealand, and the accent doesn't change no matter how long you're someplace. But so I grew up in Maryland and near the University of Maryland, and my dad would hire fire engineers. He worked for the Department of the Navy, and even though it's Navy and they have ships, they also have a lot of buildings that they're responsible for. So he was in the facilities division, and he'd come home and talk about how it was hard to find fire engineers, and that the University of Maryland had this fire engineering program. And I just thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I liked math and sciences in high school, and I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do. And University of Maryland was the local school. So I thought, okay, fine, I'll give it a go. And at Maryland, the first 2 years of engineering are pretty much the same. Most engineers are taking the same basic introductory engineering courses. It wasn't really until the third year that you got into the fire engineering. So I just thought, oh, that sounds interesting for me. I'll give it a go. And like probably some of my classmates, I was a closet pyromaniac and just, like playing with fire in a legal way. So no, so it's been great, because the department there was fantastic. It was a small department at that point. Dr. John Bryan was head of the department, and he was great about making everybody feel welcome and making you all feel part of the overall fire protection engineering department. Even if you were a new graduate, they'd have events where you'd get to know graduates from other years. So you just felt part of a continuum, if you will, from the University of Maryland. So that was fantastic. So that's what got me started. And yep, so here I am now, having started my own company, which I probably didn't expect to do at that point in time.
Yeah, I have to admit that is a very interesting journey you had with your company. I didn't know you've been managing it for so long, so that's why I want to find out some insights from you and ask you what's like managing Enlightened Solutions.
I like it. I love our clients. I love the staff. I think everybody's wonderful to work with. Our staff are really good, and the way we approach things is we're looking to help people. We're looking to help our clients develop the solution that they want. Sometimes they don't have any idea of what they want. Do they want the minimum requirement for the building code? That's fine. Do they want property protection? Do they want to minimize the risk to a heritage building? Do they want to minimize business interruption? So there are all sorts of things that they may want to know more about that they're not necessarily aware of. So when we get the opportunity to sit down and discuss things a bit more and find out what really is the goal, it's fantastic. So getting involved in the design team early is really important, so we can find out, is it that fantastic atrium look that's the most important thing, or is it really budget driven? What are the key things, and how do we make sure that we're all working together to get the design and the output that the client wants?
And because we're talking about this topic, I'd like to ask you, Carol, if an engineer is interested in joining you, how will you help them get up to speed to your company, to your work?
Yep. Anybody who comes in gets mentored. I mean, it's just because we want to make sure that we have a consistent product and output, not that it's technically accurate and that it looks the same from one engineer to the next. So we're working with people to make sure we have internal reviews. And if you're new and coming from outside New Zealand, we'd sit down and we need to understand the Building Act, so you understand the overall framework, the regulatory framework, and then you understand the building code, and then the prescriptive documents that we use, and then the standards that are involved. So if you're coming from overseas and you've been practicing as a fire engineer for a while, prescriptive documents are similar. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, pretty much. Everybody kind of has a certain distance that you can travel and certain prescribed fire safety systems that have to be installed, certain fire separations. So there's a lot of commonality in the prescriptive approach. The performance-based approach or the alternative solution design approach is where there's more variability between countries.
Okay,
So yeah,
okay.
so whoever's coming would get mentored and get up to speed on local New Zealand.
That's a good thing to know because most engineers that are coming from abroad would like to actually know that they will be mentored and someone is going to work with them.
Mm-hmm. And you have to, I mean, and if somebody has CPEN from overseas, they'd still have to be able to demonstrate knowledge of New Zealand requirements. So we need to make sure that they're able to get that knowledge so they can transfer.
Yeah, and I know you have your headquarters in Christchurch, but you're working on projects within the whole country. So I've seen like 20 Custom House Key, which is the most seismic resistant old building. I've seen NZI Center in Auckland, which I think is the first commercial building that received a 5-star Green Star. And I think, these are quite interesting projects that you've been working on. And I want to ask you, what else do you have in the pipeline? What projects are you after at the moment?
We've got another multi-story office building in Wellington as well, and it's got a center atrium for a client, so they wanted to have their own internal stair. So that's been interesting to work on and work within the New Zealand verification method for that one. And then just a lot of warehouses. We do a fair amount of warehouses, hospital, bulk retail, doing some retirement villages, and yeah, so just a variety of things that come along. Yeah. And I guess different people are interested in different aspects of the fire engineering. So
Well, I can tell from what you're describing that you and your team do your job with a lot of passion and you do care about your team. So I want to ask you, how much do you think your team has contributed to drive Enlightened Solution where it is today?
hugely. Absolutely. You can't do anything by yourself and alone. I mean, the team is vital in order to develop the client relationships, in order to develop the technical solutions, in order to work with the councils, to make sure and work with the fire service. We need the team there, and for us internally to have a team approach to make sure we're sharing ideas, sharing the workload. We try and make sure if somebody's away, their projects are looked after. They don't disappear and then, oh, well, sorry, client, nobody's looking after their stuff because they're away. So we try and make sure everything's covered, and that if we have a crunch and something's coming due, we grab people as necessary to try and fill things and get things finished. So everybody's willing to step up and participate and help out.
Great to hear how many things can be done when you work closer to your team. Unfortunately, the last 2 years haven't been exactly ideal for that, and we had to, adapt to working from home. But luckily, people are starting to go back to the office or adopt hybrid working schedules. So I want to find out, how has the pandemic affected your business? Do you think it was easier and more efficient for you and your team to work remotely, or is it better now that you can actually meet in person?
I like meeting in person. It's just, from my perspective, easier than trying to contact somebody on Teams, because and it's the same, it's remote when you have different offices, because we have staff that are working outside of Christchurch. So it's a matter of something comes up and we want to discuss it as a team, sometimes jump on Teams literally to say, oh, here, let's we can all get on Teams and discuss this idea, where, if you're all in the same office, it just makes it easier. So, but I think for everyone's benefit, the hybrid approach a lot of times is best, because some people do work better at home. So, they like the peace and quiet and not getting interrupted. So, it's better at home, but to be always at home, you miss that team building aspect of it. And some of the consistency in approach is missing because you're not able to talk to each other or interact. So I think, to me, that's important, to still have that interaction. So, and from a hybrid approach, at least you're not having the longer commute. If you're in Christchurch, it's easy. You can ride a bike in. So that's pretty good. So, but other parts of New Zealand, you can have a longer commute.
Yeah.
So, certainly there's benefit to working from home.
Yeah, I think so. So one more question for you, Carol. This career gave you the opportunity to travel and see how things are in other countries. What piece of advice would you give to the younger generation of engineers?
To younger generations, I'd say give fire engineering a go. I mean, there's so many ways you can use fire engineering. It's got huge breadth. I mean, if you have if you're getting it as a master's degree, if you had an undergraduate chemical degree, you can do things that are industrial process related to fire engineering, because there are a lot of manufacturing plants or chemical plants or that sort of thing where they need the fire engineering aspects looked at. Or you might even be involved in developing research design proposals and experimental proposals with the chemical background. If you got the mechanical, then you might have more interest in doing some of the smoke control or smoke management types of activities. If your structural background or like the structures, there's a huge need for structural fire engineering, because that's another area where I'd say the gap is being closed in terms of, it used to be structure was over here and fire was over here. And now we're getting more people who are familiar with both and have good expertise in both and how the structure is going to respond in fire. And there's just a lot more detail happening with the designs in terms of detail up front, getting a lot more of the building design done in those initial stages. And with BIM and a lot of other technology, you can do a lot more now. You can do your passive designs up front. You can look for clashes. You can say, can we paint that intumescent paint later when the environment's better for it, so it's not exposed to, the outdoor air environment and things like that. So there's a lot that can be done. And if you're interested in wildfires, you can, do fire engineering, take on wildfires or firefighter safety or human behavior. So there's just all sorts of avenues, that you can go with the fire engineering. It's a huge, broad field, and it's still fairly new. There's all sorts of things, the lithium batteries. What's happening with those? How are we going to deal with those? You're getting more and more batteries everywhere. So how do you deal with them from a firefighting standpoint, from a building safety standpoint? Even, charging electric forklifts. Should you put them in a fire cell, an enclosure, because they can generate hydrogen sometimes in the charging process. So, what do you need to do? So there's just lots there, lots and lots. So
I completely agree with
do
you.
it.
I completely agree with you, Carol. And we really encourage all the young generation to at least give a try to fire engineering, to the ones who have, let's say, a mechanical background or aerospace background.
Anything. Yep. Yeah, with the fire modeling, a lot of the other disciplines, the aerospace, I think, has a lot of the CFD modeling involved. And it's also a portable career. So if you want to travel and work in a different country, there's enough demand for fire engineers that I think most countries, you can gain entry with an engineering credential in the fire engineering. So, you're in demand, so companies can help you with visas and things like that to get in to work. So it's another option.
Yes.
Get your traveling paid for.
Um,
Get your OE paid for.
You should do this, guys. And that was it for today, folks. And many thanks to
Okay,
Carol for
great.
explaining to us with passion and patience the beauty of this career.
Thanks. Hopefully somebody will take it up.